I grew up in a pretty broken home. My father countless times used to hit me, smack me around. I really felt no love in my household, no love in my home. I was very fearful of my father. He kicked me out at a very young age. I was about 15 years old, and I lived on the street for about 2 years. I showered up in a McDonald's bathroom. I stole food from a Wallbounds at the time just to eat. Felt like nobody cared about me. Nobody was there for me. As I grew up, I got more and more bitter and hardened in my heart as I saw the ways of the world and the things that were going on. You know, and I dropped out of high school. I never graduated. I just felt alone. I felt scared. And in that, I just made this thing around me that I'd rather be feared than loved. I really didn't want anything to do with Jesus. I didn't want anything to do with God. I just wanted to lead my own life and do my own thing. But I always thought about family. I always thought if I had a family, I'd do it differently. And so when I finally got married and I met my wife, I thought things would change and I would be, you know, the man that my father wasn't, and I would love my kids. But it ended up that I didn't love my kids that way, and I was becoming more and more like my dad. And I began to get really angry at my kids, get angry at my wife, and I blamed them for the way my life was. I never looked at myself and said, it's you did this to yourself. I loved my kids, but I didn't love them. I loved myself more. I began to take all the money that I had and buy things that I thought were gonna bring me some sort of happiness, some sort of joy and peace in my life, but they never did. And it just grew more and more debt, and I got more and more angry, and I drank more and more, and then I started hanging with the wrong guys and the wrong crew, and I ended up getting arrested. I used to curse and scream at my wife. I would cut her down with my words. I would punch holes in walls. My kids were fearful of me. The very person I didn't want to become is the person that I ultimately became in my life. And it got so bad that me and my wife talked about getting a divorce. And I think my exact words when we sat there outside that day at my in-laws' house is, fine by me. If that's what you want, I don't care. That's how hard my heart was, but I began to think about it, and I was like, I really don't want to lose my wife and lose my kids, and where am I going to go? I was living at my in-laws at the time. I had spent all my money on ridiculous things. I didn't save any money. I had no career path. I had no hope. I had no future. And I felt like I'm just going to be alone again, and I'm going to be now this 30-year-old guy on the street like when I was 16. And I don't want to be that guy, so I was just fearful. And me and my wife talked, and she said, unless you change, unless you do something with your life, then I just want out. And so I said, okay, I'll look for something to do. And I just thought of any prestigious job I could get, and I thought a police officer would be pretty good, and I could prove everybody wrong that I could actually do something with my life. And so I filled out the preliminaries online for the San Diego Police Department, and I thought, great, this is going to change our lives. I was super excited. When I got out there, I felt good. I was in good shape. I had been working out. My wife said, this is a good thing. This is going to change our lives. And so all my hopes and everything were set on getting this job. The first day of the testing out there was a psychological, and there was 500 questions on the test. And when I left the testing, I felt very confident that I passed. As the results came in, I began to read, and it said, you know, part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4 pass, and then part 5 failed. And so my hopes, my dreams, and everything that I had everything set on just vanished in an instant. And my wife called me right in that moment, and she said, how's everything going? I picked up the phone and I said, it's great, everything's good, this is going to change our lives. I didn't have the heart to tell her. And I began to think of how much I've messed up my life. And I was supposed to be out there for 3 days. All I could find myself doing is lying to my wife every day, telling her I've passed. I went on to the next exam and just drinking every night. I thought to myself, I can't go back. I can't go back to my family. I can't go back to my wife and tell her that I failed. And the last night that I was there, I decided to just take my life. And I had a bottle and I had some pills, I actually barricaded the door shut because I didn't want anybody to come in, even if I called out for help, because I knew in my own heart I might, and just tell somebody to help me and to save me, but I didn't want anybody to be able to save me. I just wanted to die, but I had this fear in my heart, like, where am I going? What's going to happen to me, you know? But I just knew that I didn't want to be here anymore. I filled up the bathtub and I thought, I'll take this bottle, I'll take these pills, and I'll just go to sleep, and I'll just drown, and I'll just not wake up, and I'll be free of this pain and this suffering that I'm feeling in this world. And I'll be free, and everybody will be free from me, because the world's just better off without me. I was believing every lie that the devil spoke to my head. And I laid there on the bed, and for the first time in my life, I looked up, and I said, God, if you're real, do something. Because I'm broken. I have fears, I have worries, I have doubts. I don't see you in this world. I see hurt, destruction, pain, and I hate myself the most. I hate the person that I am and the things that I've done. And I need somebody to help me. And if you're real, help me. And I found myself reach over to the drawer, and there just happened to be a Bible in it. I never read the thing before in my life. I picked it up and I began to read in Genesis, because I didn't know where else to read, you know. And it said, in the beginning, God. And God created, you know. And I was like, wow, all right. Well, if you created me, then you can fix me, because I'm broken and I'm hurting and I need you to fix me. And I fell asleep, Bible on my chest, and I didn't do what I planned on doing. And it had been the first night in about 25 years that I slept solid through the night. I went down and I had some breakfast at the hotel, and the waitress there wouldn't even talk to me. I kind of just wanted somebody to talk to me and tell me like everything's going to be okay. And as I was going back to my room, this woman carrying a cart of linens, who was catering an event on the 9th floor, happened to come in to the elevator with me. And I was sitting there thinking, maybe I should just finish what I started the night before, because I really don't feel any different. And the fear and the shame and the guilt of my sin and everything that I've done just gripped my heart again. And I thought to myself, I'm going to end everything, and this is it for me. And that's when the woman in the elevator just started making small talk with me. Just started asking me questions. You know, were you in the military? And I just answered yes. She probably just saw this haircut, and I just said yes, and I never was. And she reached out her hand and she said, thank you for your service. And I felt like the worst person in the world, because now I'm stealing somebody's honor who defended this country, and I've never done a good thing in my life. And all those thoughts came back to me that I'm worthless, I'm a loser, I lie about everything, I'm no good, and it's better that I just take my life. And as I stepped out of the elevator onto my floor, the woman stepped out with me. Her name was Maria. She said, I need to ask you something else. And I turned and I looked at her, and I noticed that the doors were shut and her stuff was still on there. And I said, ma'am, your stuff's on the elevator. And she said, it doesn't matter. I don't care right now. And I felt something like just take hold of my heart before she even spoke. And she said, I need to ask you a question. And she looked right at me and she said, if you were to die today, are you 100% sure you're going to heaven? Any other time in my life, I would have said, you know, get away from me. I don't need that right now. But it struck my heart. It was like something just drove straight through my heart. And I began to cry, and I said, no, I'm not. And that's the question I've been asking myself. And this woman looked right at me and she said, God is calling me to you right now, and he doesn't want you to do what you're about to do. And I said, what's that? And she looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, you want to take your life? And I just began to cry and say, how could you possibly know that? She said, I don't, but God does. And he loves you, and he wants you to know what Jesus did for you upon that cross. And she began to speak to me about Jesus in a way I never heard before, and how much he loved me, and why he endured that cross, and all that it meant, And it was like filling in the gaps of everything that I heard before. It was just making sense. And she grabbed me and she said, "Come with me." And we went to the 9th floor, and her sister was there. And these women began to pray over me, but in a way I never heard before. And at first I was just listening to them. And they were talking to God as though they knew him. And in an instant I realized, like, I don't know him like this. And that's when the woman said, "Just pour out your heart to him. Ask his forgiveness and he will forgive you, I promise you." And I said, "God, forgive me for the lying, for the cheating, for the stealing, for hurting everybody that I've hurt. Help me, save me, because I don't know what to do anymore." I realized in an instant, as I was before the mercy seat of God, that if he was to say to me in that moment, like, "Get away from me," that would have been right. That would have been what I deserved, because I don't deserve to come into his presence. I don't deserve to be near him. But instead I heard with a clear voice speak to my heart and just say, Chris, lay these at my feet. Never think of these again. You are forgiven." And in a moment I felt this love and this peace and this mercy come over me that I never felt before in my life, but that I searched for in the drugs and the alcohol, in the material things. I searched for it all my life, and there it was, like, right in front of me. And the women began to just praise God and jump up and down and say, "This is amazing." And I remember saying to them, like, "You don't understand, like, God's here, like, he's real." To the women who were telling me about God in the first place. And I returned home, and I was just a changed person. My wife saw it immediately. My in-laws, everybody. I began to just tell everybody about Jesus. I even told somebody about Jesus on the plane on the way home, and what God had just done in my life. I didn't know anything about him. I hadn't read the Bible or anything. But what made it so real to me is 2 weeks after, I had just finished reading, or actually I think a friend of mine sent me 2 Corinthians 5:17, which says, "Whoever is in Christ is a new creation. The old is gone, the new has come." And I was like, the old man is really gone. Like, I was not that guy anymore. I never drank again. I never smoked again. I never did drugs again. I never even watched explicit things again on the internet. I was just a completely changed man. And I was putting my daughter to sleep. And, I hardly ever kissed her before she went to bed. I really wasn't that loving towards her. And she saw it, and she was only 4 years old, but she saw the guy that Daddy was before. And as I put her to sleep, I prayed over her, and she grabbed my arm, and she said, "Daddy, what changed in you?" And it broke my heart, because she could see the change, and I thank God for it. And I said, "Jesus, you changed my life. He is the true Son of God. He is God. And he's given me a second chance to love you, and I'm going to do my best to love you as he shows me how to." And she grabbed me and she hugged me, and she said, "I love my new daddy." The very verse that I just read. I don't do everything perfect, and there's many times that I fail, but I know that I could come to him, and I know that he's forgiving, and he's loving, and he's merciful. And I pray for anybody who watches this, and anybody who is feeling the way that I was feeling. God is there. He is ready and willing to forgive you of everything. He wants to draw close to you, and he wants you to draw close to him. And all you have to do is come to him by way of that cross, believe that his son died, believe that he rose again, and ask for his forgiveness, and he will forgive you. My name is Chris, and this is the story of how God forever changed my life.